Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today I'll be making this card featuring the amazing Paper Sweeties dolls, outfits, friends, and even pets. So what I'll be focusing on is using masks to actually dress your dolls and stamp them out so that they are all on a single layer. Now, the first thing I'll do is actually just stamp out several images that I may or may not use, but I'm actually stamping this on Avery repositionable labels. These work as great masks because they are adhesive lined, but the adhesive is repositionable or removable. So you can use these a few times, I think, before you'll have to make new masks, but they're really nice, affordable, and definitely cost less than if you were to buy like proper masks papers, through various other brands. So what I'm going to do is fussy cut the images that don't have coordinating dies. And to be honest, because the coordinating dies do actually leave a little bit of a white border, you may actually prefer to fussy cut all of your images, even if they do come with a coordinating die. That way you can cut close and right on the line, and later if you do any ink blending on your backgrounds, then your background will go all the way to the edge of the image. And I'll show you more close up how the difference between the two, and I think it's just going to be a matter of preference, what you prefer. Now, these little kiddos are from the Planner series, and I initially thought that maybe I'll include them in the family portrait, but decided that I'll actually have this family more represent my own family, so my husband, myself, and our two dogs. So I'm gonna also stamp out the base paper doll. This is Jake and Madison that I'll be working with, and I'm using them as kind of placeholders so that I can set my scene along with the masks that I've stamped out. So the little puppy there is a Paper Sweeties pet stamp set that you can get, and it does have a coordinating die set as well. And this little pup is a little bit larger in scale, but that works because we have a medium-sized dog and a small dog. So they don't look anything like these two dogs, but I figure it's close enough. So you can use these masks to move things around, position them how you'd like to compose your scene, and then we get to the fun part of actually stamping and laying down your masks so that you can kind of stamp everything out in stages. And the main thing to keep in mind as you're using the masking technique is that you want to work from what is in the foreground, so whatever image is closest to you that may be blocking other images in your scene, you want to actually stamp those out first and then work your way from front to back. So once you've composed your scene and you have an idea for what you would like to how you would like to stamp out your images, identify what is going to be the frontmost image. And generally, this will be the image that you're going to see in full. Nothing else is going to be blocking it. So once you have that stamped out, you'll want to go ahead and place your mask over it. Now, I'm using a hybrid ink because I'll be coloring these with an alcohol marker. If you use a ink like VersaFine, which takes a little bit longer to dry, then you may want to wait before putting on your masks just so that you can avoid accidentally smearing it. So if that's the case, you can identify the next closest image that doesn't interfere with your first image. So that's why I stamped out the other puppy on the opposite end, just to show you what you can do. However, I don't have to really worry too much because the hybrid ink that I'm using actually dries really quickly. So, so just bear that in mind. Just depending on your ink choice, you do want to kind of decide whether it's safe to put your mask on right away or not. Now then, when it comes to the clothing and the dolls, the clothing is the outer layer of that particular character. And so we're going to stamp out the outfit first and mask that off so that whatever parts of the body that our Sweeties doll or friend is not covered by clothing will be visible behind the mask. So I'm going to actually use my Make Art Station here and the stamp positioning tool so that I can really get this where I want it. And if needed, stamp again. Because you are stamping over the mask, which should be relatively thin, and the Avery labels are a thin paper. Sometimes, though, just that little bit of extra thickness may result in a stamped image that might not be totally crisp all the way to the lines. So that's where a stamp positioning tool is going to be really useful so that you can stamp a second time exactly in the same location if needed. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with Madison. I'm going to just give myself a few reference points for where her outfit needs to get placed. And so I'll stamp her outfit first, along with her shoes. And once that goes down, I'll place the masks and then I'll stamp the Sweeties doll herself, like her full body with her head and hair and everything. So just make sure that as you're going, you're working from what's frontmost all the way to the back. And then I've made this mistake a lot of times as well. I'll work in that order, but then at some point I'll forget to put the mask on. And so do remember to actually use your masks. And I found that it's actually not very hard to line up the Sweeties dolls behind their clothing. So you just want to be careful, take your time, and just get it to line up as best you can. I think there is probably some room for forgiveness because I just really didn't have an issue with lining it up at all. Now, I do have some masks of Jake and Madison that I used the die, coordinating die to cut out. And so I'm going to put that over top. And at this point, our entire family is masked off. So I can now actually ink blend a background and not have to worry about inking over the images that we've just stamped out. So initially, I started using a blending brush that was a little dirty. I guess I hadn't cleaned it before, and so I do have a spot that's a little bit darker than I intended, but that's okay because I am using a Distress Oxide ink, and so it's a little bit opaque and it can layer a little bit. So I was able to recover it a little, and then I also added some Walnut Stain Distress Oxide just to give it a more sort of mottled background. So hopefully that dark spot in the center that I started at looks a little bit more intentional. So now the fun part is actually peeling off your masks and seeing the reveal of your scene. And as I peel this off, you can see that where I've used stamps that have the coordinating dye that leaves a little bit of that outline, sort of like where this puppy is. You can see that the ink blended background doesn't go all the way up to that line. And in fact, if you look at Madison's shoes, there is a gap sort of right between her shoes that is just plain white. So just bear in mind there's going to be some spots like that. So if you do a blended background like I've done here, you might have some gaps where your paper was covered by the mask. And so what I did to actually minimize that a little bit was I just use a little kind of a blending sponge that generally I use with my pastels, but you could use I think these are really similar to eye makeup applicator sponges, and I'm going to use the exact same Distress Oxide ink that I use to make the background. And because this blending sponge is small, I can really kind of get into those areas. So that little gap between Jake's head and Madison's head, the little gap between Madison's feet, those are areas where there's just a little bit too much white showing, and I'll try to fill in as many of those gaps as I can, just to make it look a little bit more seamless, a little bit more realistic. And that's something that's totally optional, but if you don't mind the way that it looks, then you can definitely just leave it as is. So here I'm going to use the rectangle scallop frame from Paper Sweeties, and I've just got a couple of layers of black and then one layer of brown, which I ran through a wood texture embossing folder. And I want to frame this portrait of my family. And what I'm going to do, because the frame itself isn't large enough to fit our whole family behind there, I actually created two die cut frames, and what I'm going to do is cut them apart and piecemeal them back together, because between the two I can actually frame the entire USA 2 size card front that I am working on. So the trick is to try to line up the scallops, and then when I make the cut where two pieces are going to join together, I actually place one over the other and I cut them both at the same time. That way you can be a little bit more assured that you'll have the exact same angle, so that when you butt those two ends up together, they will match up. So this is kind of something that you can do if you don't have, frame dies that are going to exactly match your needs. So you can sort of scale them up. Now, I am going to end up with seams that are visible, and so that may not be a look that you want, but I just wanted to show this technique as an option, so that you don't have to have every size and shape frame die. You can modify what you have to suit your needs if you don't mind having those seams showing. So here you can see my background where I've ink or just filled in those white gaps a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and trim down my scene, and making sure that everything will still fit within the frame that I made. And it's definitely one of those things you want to measure twice, cut once, because masking can take a little bit of time and effort, and coloring a large scene like this, I didn't leave any of my coloring in because it did take a while to color in, and we'd be here forever if I left that in the video. But that's basically my card complete. So I know it's a very simple looking card, but I think it's just really fun take on for the holidays, sending out your family portrait as a kind of stamped character version as opposed to a real photo of your family. So I'm not even going to add a sentiment to this just because I just think it's a really sweet image all by itself. And when I go to use this card, I'll decide what occasion it's for and perhaps pop a sentiment on at that point. I hope that you enjoyed this video and just a different take on how to use the Paper Sweeties dolls. If you want to check out any of the products that I used to make this card, I'll leave links to them in the description box below. Thanks so much again, and until my next video, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye!